friends, Mimi G here. Today we're going to be working on my pre-fall pattern 8177 View D and E, which is the coat or vest. Now if you're new to sewing or you just need a little refresher course, make sure and watch the Sewing Basics video linked in the description box below. I cover all sorts of things like picking your pattern size, cutting out your tissue paper, reading all the instructions that are printed on your actual pattern, how to cut your fabric, how to read grain lines, and a whole lot of other useful information. Watch that video, then come back and sew along with me. Okay, we're going to start with our front. I want you to go ahead and pin your darts, and we're going to sew our darts in place. I'm going to pin, making sure I'm going in through both lines. And then I'm going to pin at the tip so I know where to stop. And then pin the other one the same way. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and stitch our darts. Back stitch at the beginning. So completely off, don't backstitch, and you're going to tie your threads together. Make a knot, and then make one more knot. You're going to do the other dart the same way. Okay, once your darts are done, go ahead and press them facing down, and we're going to attach our band to the front. So you should have 2 notches that match up to the 2 notches on the front. So we're going to lay them right sides facing, and we're going to pin at those notches first. You're going to pin both of your front bands to your front piece the same way we just did this one. And then we will sew them down. Okay, we're going to go ahead and sew down our band to our fronts, and we're going to use 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Back stitch at the end, and you're going to do the other one the same exact way. Okay, go ahead and press your seam allowance towards the body of your front, not towards your band, and then set these aside and grab your back pieces. And we're going to lay these with right sides facing. And we're going to stitch our center back seam. So your center back seam should have 3 notches. So make sure your 3 notches align and pin there first. And we're going to stop stitching when we reach our dot. You should have a dot there. Okay, so we stitched all the way down the center back, and then we're going to stop, like I said, at this dot here. You should have marked this from your tissue paper, and we're going to use 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, we're going to back stitch at the beginning. I'm going to stop and back stitch at my dot. And now we're going to press this. Okay, now we're going to stitch from our dot across the top of our vent. So I'm going to put my needle in right at that dot. And I'm going to stitch and back stitch. Now we're going to go ahead and press this to one side. Okay, so we want to press this seam up here past above our vent open. So I'm going to snip just into one side, not both, until I reach that dot. And then we're going to press this open. And I'm going to pin this closed just for now. And now we're going to attach front to back at the shoulders. So with the back facing me, the right side facing up, I'm going to take one front. I'm going to match my shoulder notches and pin. And you're going to do the same thing with the other shoulder. And now we're going to stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, we're going to stitch across our shoulder, so back stitch at the beginning. And you're going to do the other shoulder the same way. Okay, now we're going to pin together and sew together our facings. So this is the front facing and this is your back facing. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pretend these are shoulders. So we're going to pin just like we do our regular shoulders. We'll do the same thing for the shoulder of the facing. And you're going to pin both sides. And we're going to stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then we will attach our facing to our jacket. And I want you to go ahead and press these seams open. Okay, now we're going to pin our facing to our jacket. So what we're going to do is we're going to place our facing over the top of our jacket, right sides facing. So you can go ahead and pin first at the notches in the back. You can match your shoulder seams and pin. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm not finishing the raw edges of my jacket, but for you at home, if you have a serger or you want to fold and sew, you can finish the hem along the raw edge of your facing. I'm going to pin at my corner, and then I'm going to make sure that I match my notches along the front. And then continue pinning all the way down. Pin your facing to your jacket until you reach the bottom. All right, we're going to start at the center back and we're going to work all the way around down one side, and then we're going to come back to the center back and work our way down the other end. We're going to be using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Back to the corner. And pivot. Continue sewing all the way down, and then you're going to sew your other facing the same way. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and trim this corner, and then we're going to turn this right side out. And we're going to go ahead and do some understitching. I'm going to clip into my neck, remove some of this excess. Now what I want you to do is I want you to do some understitching. So I'm going to start from the bottom. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our seam allowance is facing our facing. So it's this way. And we're going to stitch really close to the edge, only on the facing. And you're going to understitch as far up as you can go. Okay, I'm getting close to that corner, so I'm going to need to stop soon. I'm going to try and go up as far as I can. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing along the back. So I want the facing, the seam allowance to be facing the right of me. And starting at the shoulder, we're going to stitch around the back. And then go ahead and understitch the other side. Okay, go ahead and press your facing to the inside all the way around. And now we're going to attach our pockets. So I'm going to grab one pocket and I'm going to place it right side facing. And I'm going to align my notch, and you should have 2 dots. And I'm going to pin. And you're going to do this to both fronts and both sides of the back. And in the back. And we're going to stitch our pockets down. Okay, we're going to stitch our pocket down using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. You're going to stitch down all 4 pockets the same way, and then you're going to press it flat with the seam allowance towards the pocket. Okay, we're going to go ahead and sew our side seams together. So I have my front laid over my top, right sides facing, and my pockets are facing each other. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pin starting at the top, and we're going to pin at the dots that you should have for your pockets, and then continue pinning along your side. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew from under the arm all the way down till we get to this dot, and we're going to back stitch, and we're going to cut our thread. We're leaving this part here open so that our hand can go into our pocket. And then we're going to start sewing again from this dot all the way down, and we're going to do both side seams the same way. Then, after we've sewn that, we're going to sew around our pocket. Okay, we're going to back stitch, and we're going to be sewing 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to stop and back stitch at the first dot. I'm going to move all the way down, and I'm going to put my needle at the other dot and back stitch, and then continue sewing all the way down your side seam. Now we're going to go back up to the pocket. I'm going to put my needle where I stopped stitching, back stitch, and sew all the way around your pocket. And we're going to stop and back stitch where we had started stitching again. You're going to sew the other side seam and pocket the same way. Okay, I want you to clip into your seam the way I've done here, right below and right above your pocket, and then press your seams open, and then press your pocket towards the front. You're going to do this for both sides. Now we're going to set this aside, and we're going to work on our flaps. Okay, so now I want you to go ahead and pin one non-interfaced flap to one interfaced flap. And we're going to pin and sew all the way around, leaving the very top open. Okay, we're going to start at one end, and we're going to be sewing using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to sew your other pocket flap the same way. Okay, we're going to go ahead and trim around our pocket flaps. Then you're going to turn it over and you're going to press. You're going to do this to both of your flaps. Okay, so you should have a line that you marked that was on your pattern piece. It's a placement line, and that's where we're going to place our flap. So what we're going to do is we're going to place it just on top of that line, and then we're going to pin it just so it doesn't move. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew our flap down along that line using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to fold it and press down. I want you to go ahead and place your other flap on the other side the same way, and then we're going to stitch them down. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and place my presser foot down, and I'm going to stitch. We're using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And now I want you to pull your flap down, and we're going to top stitch 1/4 inch from the fold. You're going to stitch your other flap the same way. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do our sleeves. So I want you to grab your undersleeve, and you're going to put it on top of your upper sleeve, right sides facing, and make sure that your notches align. So you have a notch here and you have a notch here. So go ahead and pin at your notches first, and then pin at the top and at the bottom. And we're going to stitch this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to pull and pin this one, so we can do them both at the machine at the same time. So go ahead and pin here, match your notch, and pin at the bottom. So we'll sew one seam and then we'll sew the other seam. Go ahead and pin your other two pieces the same way. Okay, we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting at the bottom of our sleeve. Okay, now we're going to do the other seam, also using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're going to create some gathering stitches around the sleeve cap. So we're going to go into our basting stitch, and we're going to go from one notch all the way to the other. Don't backstitch when you stop, just go ahead and pull your threads. And then you're going to create another row of basting stitches 1/4 inch away from the existing stitching. You're going to sew and prep your other sleeve the same way. Okay, I turned my sleeve right side out, and so now I'm going to pin it to my coat. And so the way I like to do it is I like to pin my notches first. So I'm going to pin my single notch to my single notch. That lets me know I'm attaching the front of the sleeve to the front of the jacket. And then I'm going to do my double notches. And now I'm going to turn this over so that I'm looking at the wrong side. And I have a little dot for the center So I'm going to align that with my shoulder seam, and I'm going to pin there. And then you should have 2 other dots. So I'm going to pin there, and I'm going to pin here. I'm going to use my gathering threads to pull and remove some of the ease from this cap. You see how there's more ease in my sleeve cap than there is in my jacket. So I'm going to go pull, and then I'll distribute that fullness. Now we're not creating gathers. You don't want any puckers. You don't want any pleats. You just want enough of a pull so that it picks up all that excess. And then I'm going to pin a couple more times. And then continue pinning. And then you're going to pin your other sleeve the same way. Okay, we're going to stitch all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure it's nice and flat. You're going to sew your other sleeve the same way. Okay, all that's left for you to do is to finish off your hem. So I'm going to turn my facing actually over, and I'm going to pin because I want to stitch this down and then turn it over. And I'm going to do the same thing with my vent. I'm going to turn it over along that fold line, and I'm going to pin. And then we're going to turn up our hem allowance, and we're going to press it all the way across the bottom, and then we're going to stitch it down. Okay, I'm going to start by stitching my facing first. So like I told you, I've turned my facing back over so that right sides are facing, and I'm going to stitch an 1.5 inches away from the cut edge. And then I'm going to do the same thing where my vent is. And you should, of course, be finishing your raw edges. So I'm going to go ahead and remove some of this excess in my corner. And then I'm going to take both sides and I'm going to fully press them and turn out my corners. For a more formal look, you would go ahead and blind stitch your hem, but I am making mine out of this knit fabric, so I'm going to keep it pretty casual, and I'm actually just going to stitch down my hem. So I'm going to give myself at least a 1 inch allowance from my needle to the edge of my fabric. Once you're finished with your hem, however you prefer, you're going to finish the same hem finish on your sleeves, and then you are all done. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Until next time, peace.